Well, with the passing of my mother here at the end of July, I've been cleaning out the house and getting it ready for sale. So I've been coming across a lot of items that I haven't seen or thought about in years. And it's caused me to reflect a little on how objects tell stories. My father's dog tags that tell a very personal story of the Cuban Missile Crisis, or the silly little pins that were once part of the uniform that I wore at Wendy's in 1985 remind me of some girl I once knew. And I found something that I thought it might be of interest to the council because it tells an important story of a particular time in the history of the church. From the very beginning, Christians have faced persecution. We read about the martyrdom of St. Stephen, for example, in the Acts of the Apostles. The early church really functioned as an underground organization. One of the challenges that the early church faced was how Christians could identify one another without identifying themselves to the Roman authorities. The ichthus, the fish symbol, from very early on, was used for that purpose. In 249, Decius became the Roman emperor. And about 8 months later, in 250, he issued an edict requiring all Roman citizens to sacrifice to the Roman gods. They had to burn incense, they had to offer a prayer for the well-being of the emperor, and when they did, they got a little certificate, which you needed to buy and sell. It's debatable whether Decius really intended to unleash an empire-wide persecution of Christians, but that ended up being the effect of his edict. And it varied, the severity varied from time to time and place to place. The situation was particularly bad for Christians in North Africa. Cyprian, the bishop of Carthage, initially fled. He returned, he was arrested, and in 258 he was beheaded. But it was a very difficult time for the church, particularly in that area. And they developed lots of different ways for communicating with one another, for identifying one another. There was something called a Seder square, which is a little 5x5 box with letters. It's a palindrome, actually. It reads, read it forward, read it backward, it's the same. But it's also, it just says something innocuous like the farmer turns the wheel. But it's also an anagram. And if you know how to rearrange the letters around the N that appears in the center of the square, it becomes a cross that reads Pater Noster, Pater Noster, our Father, our Father. And we find this inscribed at early Christian sites. You find it in homes. You find it in places that were surreptitiously used to say Mass. It was one of these little coded messages, ways that Christians identified themselves to one another. Well, the object that I found as I was cleaning out the house comes from North Africa, from the time of the Decian persecution. This is a Roman oil lamp. It's the real thing. It's in immaculate condition. It has never been used. And if you look closely at it, I will put it up here on the table. Anybody who wants to is welcome to look closely at it. Please be careful. It has survived 1,800 years. I don't want it to break on my watch.
We don't have that in the budget.
Don't have that in the budget. But if you look closely at it, though, notice a couple of things. Near the vent is a Chi-Rho. It's like a P over an X. It's the first two letters of Christ in Greek. The Chi-Rho symbol is inscribed, and if you turn it over, is a palm leaf, the symbol of martyrdom. And we're left to wonder, this was obviously made by a Christian. Why was it never used? I don't know, of course, but I have some suspicion that the person who made this didn't live long enough to use it, given that we know the time and place that this comes from and what the church was experiencing in terms of persecution in 250 AD. It tells the story of that time, and it tells the story of how Christians did these little things, like taking an ordinary household object, an object that would be part of daily use, and putting, a palm leaf underneath, to identify themselves as a Christian, to other Christians. These little symbols hidden around the house in ordinary effects that would only be meaningful to somebody in the know. And so I thought it would be interesting to kind of, do a little show and tell this evening. And so I brought my oil lamp in for you to all take a look at. Thank you.